The first time a human pledged loyalty to a Vraxian High Marshal, the act was categorized as a potential precursor to psychological warfare. The Vraxian mind, a marvel of logic-tessellated cognition and strict hierarchical programming, had no folder for emotional allegiance without contractual recompense. To them, loyalty was transactional, formalized in triple-stamped blood agreements, reinforced by public declarations and biometric locks. You didn't just offer loyalty. You filed it. When Corporal Aiden Riker, Terran Defense Forces, bled out on the fractured hull of the Vraxian dreadnought unyielding calculation, dragging his intestines like a grotesque tail as he covered the retreat of the Vraxian platoon, the Vraxians reported the event to their central logic node as potentially malfunctioning ally, displayed irrational protective behavior. The logic node flagged it for further study and added a red tag. Human Behavior Anomaly 10,832. That was the beginning. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind to the day humanity was allowed aboard the Vraxian Galactic Concord as junior security auxiliaries. The Vraxians had waged a dozen centuries of bloodless, calculated conquest. Every decision, every maneuver, was vetted through probability matrices and risk assessment algorithms, so advanced they could predict revolutions 50 years before the first whisper of rebellion. Civilizations didn't fall to the Vraxians. They were politely reasoned out of resistance. Then Earth made contact. Earth, a backwater blue ball spinning in the arm of a minor spiral galaxy, was a statistical hiccup in the algorithm. When the Vraxians first attempted to assimilate Earth through their usual soft power mechanisms, diplomatic subjugation, cultural influence via superior streaming content, and economic seduction, humans responded by inventing 3 new languages, establishing 17 contradictory governments within the same hemisphere, and releasing a reboot of Baywatch that inexplicably took off among Vraxian youths. The Vraxians pivoted. Earth was to be monitored, studied, and above all, contained. Assign them a liaison, a harmless role, security auxiliaries maybe, let them feel important. Which is how Aiden Riker ended up aboard the unyielding calculation. He arrived late, chewing synthetic gum, wearing his uniform with precisely the kind of insubordination that Vraxian dress code enforcers documented with a low hiss of dismay. His boots weren't shined. His neural implant had been tampered with to emit elevator music instead of the required tactical updates. He had, within 4 hours of onboarding, made 3 friends, 2 enemies, and a highly inappropriate bet with an intelligence officer involving a hyperturret and a gelatinous recreation of a xanthid queen. But he did one thing right. He chose to protect his unit, even when that unit didn't see him as one of their own. Private Riker, High Marshal Zelvok of the Vraxian elite, commented after his first week, "Your presence is statistically disruptive. However, your mission success rate is anomalously high." Aiden saluted upside down while hanging from a maintenance rail. "You say disruptive like it's a bad thing, Marshal Z, but tell me, has anyone tried turning the enemy's ammo stores into a localized nightclub before I got here?" "No, exactly. Your methods lack structure. Your face lacks rhythm, still works, though." The Vraxians didn't know what to make of him. He outthought predictive algorithms by making decisions no sane person would. He charged into battles with odds that should have resulted in 42 confirmed deaths and came out with minor bruising and a boot full of alien pastry. When he bonded with the squad's recon drone and named it Beep, it started responding only to his voice commands and refused to obey orders unless they were phrased in rhyme. Eventually, they just gave him his own team and kept the paperwork off the main server to avoid triggering audits. Then came the Jelthar incursion. The Jelthar were silicon-based hive intelligences, immune to standard neural disruption fields and capable of adapting to energy weapons within seconds. Where the Vraxians saw a tactical stalemate, Aiden saw an opportunity. Let's paint the hull of their hive ship with dissolving symbols in a pattern that translates to "Mother was a lava lamp." Then launch a boarding party inside a giant cake. That plan contains no tactical coherence. No, but it contains a cake. That's morale, that's misdirection, that's humanity, baby. And it worked. The Jelthar hive ship opened fire on the cake, revealing the boarding pod inside too late to stop the infiltration. The Vraxians still haven't figured out how he convinced the Jelthar's central spire to surrender by pretending to be a rogue AI with commitment issues. The Vraxian High Command began filing his actions under strategic nonconformity, a polite way of saying we don't get it, but it keeps working. But loyalty, that wasn't on the ledger. Not until the day High Marshal Zelvok was shot during a breach maneuver on the moon of Raxtel by friendly fire, or more accurately, by human fire. Aiden's own commanding officer on loan from Earth, Colonel Juno Price, ordered the breach prematurely, underestimating the Vraxian squad's current position and dismissing Zelvok's strategic input as overcooked caution. Zelvok took a rail slug to the lung sac. He fell alone, his auxiliary translators fried by the impact. He tried to crawl back behind the barricade. A Jelthar drone spotted him. That's when Aiden made the choice. He ran. Not away from the cover, from safety. He ran toward Zelvok, dragging a portable shield wall with him, diving into fire, screaming nonsense battle hymns from the Terran Navy, and shooting with the kind of terrifying accuracy only adrenaline and stubborn insanity can produce. He reached the High Marshal. He didn't leave. They were pinned for 9 minutes. Aiden held the line. He was shot 3 times. He held anyway. He gave Zelvok his oxygen line. He burned through half his suit systems to keep the Marshal's vitals stable. He survived. Zelvok survived. The Jelthar did not. Later, in the sterile cool of the medbay, Zelvok watched the human sleeping beside him, arm in a cast, eye covered in a patch, humming to himself even in sedation. Why? Zelvok finally asked. Aiden blinked awake, groggy but grinning. You're my squad, Marshal Z. I don't leave squad behind. You disobeyed command protocol. You endangered yourself. You degraded your equipment's integrity. Yep, and I'd do it again. You're one of mine now. Zelvok stared, no contract, no pact, no promise of reward. Pure, chaotic, irrational loyalty. The first entry in the Vraxian Central Node under Human Behavior Anomaly 10,832 was quietly amended. Loyalty, non-transactional attachment based on shared adversity and proximity, possibly viral. They still didn't understand it. But they would. And soon, they'd see what happens when it's aimed at them. 6 weeks after the Raxtel incident, Marshal Zelvok found himself staring at a wall-mounted holograph of Earth's most famous loyalty icon. A golden retriever wearing aviator goggles, emblazoned with the caption, "Would die for you. Would also die for Sandwich." The image was courtesy of Aiden Riker, who had submitted it as educational material on Terran loyalty mechanisms. The Vraxian Educational Board promptly flagged it as satire, propaganda, and psychological self-harm. Aiden framed their rejection notice and hung it next to the dog. Zelvok, despite himself, kept glancing at it during mission briefings. He didn't understand it, but he couldn't ignore it either. The human had disrupted his internal logic paths, which was a polite way of saying made him feel things he had no instruction manual for. Not respect, not admiration. Those he knew. This was different. This was a sense of safety when the illogical human was nearby. The sense that no matter how absurd the battlefield became, someone would stand between him and disintegration. And he wasn't the only one catching feelings. Across the ship, human auxiliary personnel had begun infiltrating the cultural core of the Vraxian crew, not through strategy, but sheer, casual affection. They gave nicknames. They remembered birthdays, which Vraxians only acknowledged every 5 years. They distributed personalized coffee blends based on stress hormones. They staged ridiculous plays dramatizing shared missions and insisted the Vraxians act in them. At first, the aliens resisted. Then someone caught high strategist Tharnjuk quietly practicing his lines in the waste recycling chamber. It spread from there. And while Earth's upper command sent an endless stream of instructions, none of which Riker read in full, something deeper was changing. The unyielding calculation had become the first Vraxian dreadnought to post weekly morale memes in the tactical alert queue. Unit cohesion was off the charts, productivity rose, and in a real stunner, 2 Vraxian tactical officers requested reassignment to human-integrated squadrons, citing increased flexibility and undefined comfort response. But of course, nothing golden stays. Trouble arrived in the form of the Abrex Accord. The Abrex were part-time peacekeepers, full-time bureaucratic sadists. They didn't like loyalty unless it had a hierarchy, a ledger, and a monthly performance review. Their idea of camaraderie involved pre-approved group lunches and shared access to spreadsheet templates. And they had noticed something odd in Vraxian reports. An entire human auxiliary was displaying irrational, unsanctioned attachment to their commanding Vraxians. That was dangerous. That was deviant. That was the kind of thing that led to unfiled hugs. So they demanded an audit. Marshal Zelvak was summoned to a tribunal orbiting Pelarian Prime. Aiden volunteered to go too. "You will behave?" Zelvak asked warily as the transport ship powered up. Aiden grinned and handed him a cup of hand-labeled Zen brew, now with less existential dread. Define behave. Not inside a cross-species food fight in the tribunal cafeteria. Aiden sipped. That happened once. Also, they started it. The tribunal was a sterile monument to boredom, gray corridors, dull lighting, and a scent that could only be described as citrus death. The Abrex representatives were shaped like corporate policy and had the warmth of rejected tax forms. They grilled Zelvak for 9 hours straight. "Why did your subordinate disobey a direct order to save your life?" "Because I am part of his unit." "That is not an acceptable reason." "To him, it is." "Then he is malfunctioning." "He is human." The Abrex didn't blink. They didn't have eyes. But they emitted a smell like scorched garlic, which the Vraxians had learned to interpret as bureaucratic offense. Then they turned to Aiden. "Explain your actions on Raxtel. Why risk your life for a non-human?" Aiden leaned back, boots on the table, arms crossed like he was settling in to dismantle a particularly smug puzzle. "Why, that's easy. He's my squad. You don't let squad die. Doesn't matter if they're human, Vraxian, Abrex, or a sentient traffic cone." But there was no obligation. That's the point. It's not about obligation, it's about choice. Aiden stood, circling the tribunal like a predator with a vendetta against outdated paradigms. You don't earn loyalty from humans with rank. You earn it with presence, with grit, with doing the hard things shoulder to shoulder. Zelvak's not just my commander. He's my guy, my ride or die, my shield in the breach. You think I care what species he is? He bled with me. That's enough. That is deeply inefficient. Aiden smiled, wide and wild. Yup, that's why it works. You can't predict it. You can't replicate it. You can't code it. That's human loyalty. Once you've got it, we're a swarm of angry bees with a vendetta and an unlimited supply of duct tape. Good luck stopping that. The Abrex tribunal recessed early, citing elevated emotional contamination. Back on the ship, things got worse. The Abrex had filed a motion to separate human auxiliaries from Vraxian command until the loyalty virus could be contained. The decision would come down in 48 hours. Zelvak called an emergency war council. The humans brought snacks. Aiden brought fire. "If they split us, it's game over," he told the room, a mix of Vraxian, human, and one suspiciously disguised Jelthar who claimed to be just a big fan of chaos. "They're scared because they don't get it. We're rewriting the rules with friendship bracelets and blood-soaked fist bumps, and that terrifies them." "They fear what they cannot calculate," Zelvak said slowly. Aiden snapped his fingers. "Exactly, so we make it impossible to ignore. We don't just fight the ruling, we make loyalty the strategy." "How?" "By saving their assessors from an unsanctioned rebel ambush. That's right. I may have leaked tribunal movement data to some very angry pirates. Time for a loyalty demo." Zelvak's eye stalks twitched. "You manufactured an attack scenario as a form of political theater." "Marshal Z, my friend, my comrade, my favorite logic golem, I am the theater." The pirate ambush hit fast. Lasers, boarding spikes, threats shouted in 12 incompatible dialects. The Abrex assessors panicked. Then came the unyielding calculation, tearing through vacuum with impossible speed, deploying troops in synchronized drop pods labeled hugs optional, violence mandatory. Aiden led the charge, screaming a war song composed entirely of rewritten musical numbers from obsolete Earth sitcoms. They didn't just rescue the assessors. They made sure every moment of unity, every act of cover fire, every shield wall formed by interspecies units was visible, recorded, and utterly unforgettable. The Obrex were evacuated, disoriented but alive. Their final report included one line of begrudging clarity. Human loyalty may be a persistent risk factor, but once directed at your side, it becomes uncontainable strategic asset. Recommend further observation, preferably from a safe distance. Back on the ship, Zelvok approached Aiden at the observation deck, both of them watching the stars spin. I still do not understand this, loyalty. Aiden clinked his drink against the marshals. That's okay, you don't have to, you just have to know it's real. And it is directed at me. Aiden grinned. You, Marshal Z, are now the proud recipient of one human's undying loyalty, complete with sarcasm, reckless plans, and an annual holiday I will invent in your honor. Zelvok took a long moment. Then, with utmost solemnity, he said, I will prepare my schedule for this holiday. The holiday began with an explosion. Not a metaphorical one, a literal, concussive, full symphony of shrapnel and poor planning that detonated in the unyielding calculations Hangar Bay during what was supposed to be a quiet breakfast honoring Zelvok Appreciation Day, now with 30% more gravitas. Aiden had insisted the celebration include a fireworks demonstration. The Vraxian safety officers, wary but curious, had granted conditional approval. They assumed mistakenly that fireworks referred to light-based atmospheric displays, not repurposed flare shells re-engineered to spell ZELRULEZ in plasma across the bulkhead while also playing the Terran anthem on distorted bagpipes. The blast scorched 2 transport shuttles, slightly cooked a passing Jelthar diplomat, and scared a visiting Obrex so badly that it filed for early retirement. Marshal Zelvok stood in the smoking remains, cloak singed, staring at Aiden. Happy Z-Day, Aiden beamed, holding a charred party hat. Zelvok didn't sigh. Vraxians didn't possess lungs, but he emitted a frequency that could only be interpreted as the psychic equivalent of a long, weary exhale. Still, he accepted the hat. Because by now he understood something vital. When humans loved you, really loved you, destruction was just part of the package. After the tribunal incident, the ruling on human Vraxian integration was indefinitely delayed. The Obrex hadn't disbanded the joint units. They hadn't dared. Not after those rescue videos went viral across the Interstellar nets with subtitles like, he jumped in front of a plasma bolt for a guy who does even blink, and friendship is tactical superiority. But the backlash came from elsewhere. The Vrix Assembly, staunch traditionalists, infamous for executing traitors via legislative debate, filed a formal rebuke. They saw the growing unity as dangerous, un-Vraxian. They hated that troops were beginning to question protocols in favor of gut feelings, that strategists were citing emotional proximity in after-action reports, that some captains had even installed coffee break rooms for team bonding. So the Assembly sent an enforcer. Adjudicator Kethva, known across 10 sectors as the Scalpel of Purity. Tall, gleaming, and as warm as vacuum, Kethva was tasked with dismantling the Riker effect. His mission, dismantle the influence, separate the units, and restore Vraxian order. The Assembly didn't send warnings. They sent warnings wrapped in knives. Kethva arrived aboard unyielding calculation unannounced, his personal cruiser docking with an eerie silence that made the hull hum in discomfort. He walked into the war room and declared, without flourish, I will fix this ship. Zelvok stood. This ship is not broken. It bleeds chaos. I will excise it. Then he turned his gaze on Aiden. And you are the tumor. Aiden raised a finger. Technically, I'm more of a lovable rash. Hard to ignore, possibly contagious, usually ends in laughter. Kethva wasn't amused. He restructured the crew chain of command within 6 hours. Aiden was reassigned to sanitation. All human Vraxian joint patrols were suspended. Team cohesion drills were replaced with silent reflection hours. The word friend was blacklisted on comms. The ship went cold. Something broke, subtle but real. The humans still cracked jokes, but the spark was gone. The Vraxians moved in rigid formations again, efficient but hollow. Zelvok watched it all with a rising sensation he could not name, so he did what he never had before. He visited Aiden. In sanitation. The door opened to reveal a converted mop closet with twinkling lights, contraband snacks, a taxidermied battle helmet named Clarence, and Aiden Riker lying on the floor in a cape made of cleaning rags. Marshal Z, Aiden sat up, smiling like he wasn't slowly going insane from boredom. Come to inspect the finest cleaning detail in the quadrant. Zelvok stepped inside. They have silenced this ship. I require noise. Aiden tilted his head. Was that a metaphor? Zelvok leaned closer. We must break the silence together. Aiden stood up slowly. Marshal Z, are you asking me to start a mutiny? Zelvok's eyes glowed. I am asking you to unleash loyalty. Aiden's grin went feral. Then I've got just the plan. It began that night with a broadcast on all ship channels. Aiden, dressed as a battle preacher, declared the Church of Tactical Friendship open for business. He cited Clause 78 Gamma of the Vraxian Mission Doctrine. In cases of morale failure, unorthodox solutions may be temporarily employed to preserve unit effectiveness. Within 20 minutes, 20 Vraxians and a Jelthar joined. Phase 2, Operation Muddleheart. Aiden and Zelvok faked a malfunction in the ship's logic array. In truth, it had been bribed with limericks and old Earth riddles. The AI developed a taste for human nonsense and began inserting motivational quotes into tactical briefings. Phase 3, Strike Team, Chaos Chums. Aiden's old unit, reunited in secret, executed a flawless zero-grav prank operation that replaced Kethva's private data terminal with an interactive friendship scrapbook of his time aboard. It included captions like "First Scowl, so proud." By the time Kethva found it, someone had modified the ship's lighting system to emit comfort hue delta. The ambience was warm hug meets alien jungle sunrise. But the real blow came during the inspection drill. Kethva stood before the crew, demanding rigid performance, silent execution of orders. Instead, the units moved together, not because they were told, but because they wanted to. They flowed like water, cross-species, unchained, improvised, each action mirrored in trust, not control. They disobeyed the drill's design and nailed every objective anyway. Zelvok stood beside Kethva. You see disorder, I see evolution. You see loyalty as a strength. No, Zelvok replied, I see it as our future. Kethva left the ship that same cycle. He did not file a report. 3 days later, the assembly rescinded its complaint. No explanation. Zelvok found Aiden at the observation deck again, holding 2 cups of mystery brew. Victory drink, Aiden offered. Zelvok took it. What's in it? Possibly regret, possibly cinnamon. They drank. No words were needed. On the other side of the galaxy, other ships started requesting joint training missions with Terran auxiliaries. A new tactical doctrine began to form, unofficially dubbed loyalty warfare. And deep in the secure nodes of the Vraxian Central Intelligence Archive, a new classification appeared. Human Anomaly 10832b, Loyalty as Force Multiplier. Threat level unquantifiable. Recommendation: make friends immediately. The problem with weaponizing loyalty is that eventually, someone figures out how to reverse engineer it. Not well, mind you, but just enough to be dangerous. It started with whispers on the subspace net, quiet rumors that the Korlathi swarm, known for their hive-based neural synchronization and aggressive expansion tactics, had begun experiments with human emotional mimicry. Reports surfaced of captured Terran prisoners being used in psychological feedback loops. A new type of Korlathi unit had emerged, one that smiled. Nobody likes it when insectoid predators smile. The Vraxian High Command dismissed the rumors as speculative. Earth's representatives insisted it was impossible. Loyalty wasn't transferable like that. You couldn't synthesize it in a lab, package it, and inject it into a drone. Then the Korlathi hit Vega 6. They didn't bomb it, they hugged it. Korlathi scouts landed, posed as refugees, and then began engaging in eerily human behavior, offering to help civilians, remembering names, offering emotional support. By the time the planetary defenses were lowered, they'd converted 40% of the population into empathically linked sympathizers. It wasn't loyalty, it was imitation. A glossy copy of the real thing, shiny, seductive, empty. Marshal Zelvak called it a weaponized trust parasite. Aiden called it fake friendship with a side of brainworms. The council convened an emergency task force. Aiden wasn't invited. He showed up anyway, sliding into a seat with a bag of crunchy snacks labeled regret-flavored Screech Puffs. "Let me guess," he said, feet already on the table. "You're planning a logical, risk-assessed counterstrike, deploying minimal force to contain maximal threat and avoid diplomatic upset, right?" The room went silent. Aiden crunched louder. "You're not gonna win that way, not against mimics. The Korlathi are playing our game badly, so we changed the rules." "What rules would you suggest, Corporal Riker?" asked High Tactician Jern, with the practiced disdain of someone who wore their eyebrows like daggers. "Simple, we go in loud, we go in weird, and we show those bug-eyed bootleggers what real loyalty looks like." Zelvok backed him, not with words, with presence. That was all it took. The mission was dubbed Operation Fuzzy Hammer. The objective, infiltrate Vega 6, locate the Korlathi command node broadcasting the synthetic empathy signal, and detonate it, metaphorically or otherwise. Step 2, reinstate true loyalty bonds among the planetary population through maximum emotional chaos. Team Chaos Chums was reactivated. Beep the drone returned from leave with a new paint job and 3 illegal weapon upgrades. Aiden wore a cape made from 6 Vraxian ceremonial banners stitched together with insult embroidery. The plan, such as it was, went sideways immediately upon atmospheric entry. Their stealth shuttle was intercepted by a swarm of mimic pods broadcasting friendly greetings and offering emotional wellness assessments. The pilot, a sarcastic jellyfish named Kroll, bilated mid-sentence via escape hatch. Aiden took the helm. They crash-landed in a mall. It was the best possible outcome. Once inside, they split into teams. Aiden and Zelvok moved toward the central broadcast spire disguised as motivational speakers from the Ministry of Emotional Integrity, handing out pamphlets with blank pages and vague affirmations like, "Today you are not exploding. Keep it up." The Korlathi bought it. Mimic drones lined up for affirmations. One even asked Aiden for a hug. He gave it one. Then he whispered in its ear, "You smell like betrayal." It exploded from emotional feedback. Zelvok blinked. Was that intentional? No idea might be a new power. Let's test it. Meanwhile, Beep led a recon team into the communications subnode, broadcasting corrupted loyalty quotes spliced with ancient Terran sitcom laugh tracks. The swarm's empathy net began to fracture. The humans led real civilians into absurd bonding rituals. Trust falls off escalators, vulnerability speed dating, and an impromptu sing-along of Bohemian Rhapsody, with revised lyrics insulting the Korlathi queen. The mimicry started to crack. You could only fake loyalty so far. Then came the confrontation. The Korlathi overmind, a 3-story obelisk wrapped in glimmering empathic receptors, descended into the plaza. Its voice vibrated the bones of the living. "You created loyalty as a weapon. We refined it. You cannot win against your own invention." Zelvok stepped forward. "Incorrect. You replicated attachment. You do not understand devotion." "Semantics." "Substance," Aiden cut in. "You don't get it, bug brain. Loyalty isn't something you inject. It's something you earn. You ever drag a bleeding friend out of a burning dropship while screaming Taylor Swift lyrics to keep them awake? No, then shut up. You cannot defeat us with sentiment." "Good," Aiden grinned, "because I brought ridicule." He hit play. The ship's speakers blasted an unauthorized remix of Korlathi propaganda, spliced with fart noises, and a looped audio of the Overmind attempting to pronounce empathy like a constipated kazoo. Vraxian and human troops swarmed the courtyard under a barrage of laughter, song, and honest, heartfelt support for one another. The Overmind's network hiccuped, receptors shorted. The loyalty virus, real human-born loyalty, sank in. The feedback wasn't just emotional, it was catastrophic. The broadcast tower detonated with a sound like 10,000 breakups. The Corlathi swarm collapsed. Across Vegasix, people blinked, freed from the mimic fog, and remembered who they were loyal to. After the evac, after the debriefings, after the paperwork, all of which Aiden accidentally lost in a mysterious coffee spill, the crew gathered on the unyielding calculations flight deck. Zelvok stood beside Aiden, both looking worse for wear, both grinning like they knew something the galaxy didn't. Because they did. Loyalty wasn't just a human trait. It was a wildfire. And it had caught. Across other fleets, other crews, other empires, units began to adopt the Riker doctrine. Protect your people. Make them laugh. Blade with them. And if they jump off a cliff, make sure it's in sync, with matching parachutes and a ridiculous team motto. The Vraxians started issuing loyalty certifications. The Abrex installed a plush rec room. The Jelthar Queen announced emotional chaos initiatives. And somewhere deep in the Corlathi remnant, a new edict was carved into their walls. Do not imitate the humans. Do not provoke the humans. If you see a human charging toward you singing off-key, it's already too late. They called it the Loyalty Cascade. One planet started it, a small mining moon called Fenrith 9, where a squad of human Vraxian joint troopers built a statue, not of a war hero, but of their former supply officer, Rika. She wasn't famous, she wasn't decorated, but she once stayed behind in a collapsing corridor to rescue a crate of birthday cakes for the crew. She called them morale units. She didn't make it out. That statue had a plaque, just 5 words. She was one of ours. After that, statues popped up everywhere, not just for the fallen, for the loyal, for the friends, for the ones who bled together and laughed about it later. Entire squadrons started keeping loyalty logs not for performance metrics but for memories, inside jokes, sacrifices, cupcake recipes. The stuff no war manual ever taught, but every human instinctively knew mattered more than anything else. The High Council of Galactic Species didn't know what to do. The Riker doctrine, unofficial and unregulated, had wormed its way into the marrow of every joint command unit. Abrex files were bloated with reports marked, infected with emotional symbiosis. Vraxian protocol forums had splintered into flame wars between traditionalists and a faction known as the Fellowship of Moderate Chaos. Even the Jelthar's Hive-Thought net included a new emotion cluster, categorized as affectionate aggression paired with snacks. And Aiden Riker, he was promoted. Which was a mistake. No one knew what to call his new rank, because existing Vraxian hierarchy didn't accommodate anything that could be described as combat therapist, morale warlock, or friendship admiral. So they invented one. Supreme Auxiliary of Unorthodox Unity. He had a badge shaped like a heart on fire. Zelvok handed it to him during a weirdly emotional ceremony where every species on board pretended not to be crying. You've infected the galaxy, Zelvok said. Aiden saluted with a mug of cocoa. I prefer liberated its squishy center. But then, as always, the galaxy threw a wrench. This time it was the Urhawks. No one liked the Urhawks. Imagine a race of sentient planet-sized crustaceans who spoke in tectonic pulses, wore entire forests as armor, and regarded all other life as either prey or wallpaper. They were ancient, territorial, and as empathetic as a rock slide. For millennia, they'd remained dormant in their void sleep orbiting the black hole Zarnvul. Until someone, likely humans, probably accidentally, beamed an episode of a vintage sitcom called Space Buddies directly into the Urhawks minefield. They woke up. And they were confused. 37 warships vanished before anyone could issue a please don't vaporize us. The Urhawks didn't negotiate, they didn't conquer, they just advanced, steamrolling defense fleets with grim indifference. High Command had one answer: retreat, regroup, rearm. Aiden Riker had another. Let me talk to them. Everyone laughed nervously, awkwardly, painfully. He didn't. He boarded a single shuttle, custom painted with smiley faces, neon rainbows, and the words "free hugs plus diplomacy" on the hull. Zelvok tried to stop him, once, then saw the look in Aiden's eye. And didn't. The shuttle entered the Urhak's void field and was gone from sensors for 16 hours. Everyone assumed he was dead. Until a signal came through. Video only. It showed Aiden Riker standing atop the jagged ridge of a Urhak's carapace the size of a city, wielding what looked like a campfire stick, roasting marshmallows over a volcanic fissure. I think we're good, he said. Turns out they weren't mad, just lonely. They've been asleep for 10,000 years and missed all the major holidays. They want in. A pause. Oh, and they've declared me honor claw of the eternal clutch. Don't know what that means yet, but they gave me a hat. It's alive. I love it. And just like that, the unstoppable Urhak's tide stopped. Turned around. Offered cookies. The galaxy cracked open after that. If the Urhaks could be reasoned with, no, befriended, then everything changed. Borders softened. Joint missions multiplied. Human-led loyalty squads became the gold standard. Loyalty wasn't a tactic anymore. It was infrastructure. And Aiden. He retired. Kind of. Mostly. He bought a floating diner ship called the Last Hug and parked it in neutral space between 5 former war zones. Served terrible coffee, amazing pancakes, and lectures on why loyalty beats lasers. Zelvok visited once a month. They played cards, talked about the old days, argued about whether it was loyalty or sheer madness that had held the galaxy together. On the wall of the diner hung a plaque. This one had 7 words. If they're yours, you fight for them. And underneath, in smaller text, even if it's against logic, especially then. Outside, ships of every species came and went. Some stayed for the food, others stayed for the stories. All of them, somehow, stayed for each other. Because in the end, loyalty wasn't a rule. It wasn't a policy. It was a choice. Aiden Riker made it first. And the galaxy, finally, chose with him.